Hey, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the program presented by Novig. My guest this week, ESPN's NFL front office insider, Mike Tannenbaum, who ran NFL organizations with the New York Jets, with the Miami Dolphins, and now, along with his work at ESPN, the founder of the 33rd team. Let's get to my visit with Mike Tannenbaum. This episode of the program is presented by Novig, the peer-to-peer sports prediction market with no house, no hidden fees, and the best odds in the game. Whether you're a casual fan or a sharp trader, Novig lets you play smarter, win bigger, and make sports picks in a whole new way. And it's available in over 35 states. Learn more at novig.us/Woj and use code the program for a match up to $100 on your first purchase. Welcome into my friend and my former colleague, Mike Tannenbaum, who is the front office insider at ESPN with their NFL coverage, and the founder of the 33rd team, which is a company that essentially part media and part consulting firm for football teams across the spectrum. Maybe the best way to put it is helping them kind of gain some advantages along the edges. Mike, great to be with you again.
Well, I miss you, my friend. I miss seeing you in Bristol, and thanks so much for having me. And ESPN's loss has been the Bonnies' much great gain and win, and I know you're doing great. No surprise to any of us, and it's just great to be back with you, my friend.
Now, a lot of like with Schefter, a lot of very distracted conversations with you in the cafeteria where I'm half listening to you, half looking at my phone, and now my phone is off and you and I can just chat.
Yeah, it must be somewhat emancipating for you, like not to be wired. People don't realize, like, people think they work hard, but to watch you and Adam and Pete Thamel and Jeff Passan, like, it is 24 hours a day. I'm sure for you, there must be a sense of freedom that you haven't had in probably a couple decades.
Yeah, it's just different conversations on the phone now. It's still talking to agents. Now we're just talking about potential players versus potential stories. But let's start here, Mike. And, what's really interesting, and I think you've got a front row seat for this now, not just with your work at ESPN and the NFL. And we've seen the NFL and college football really blur, from a coaching perspective, because the money is so great in college football, that you see more movement between the NFL and the highest levels of college football than maybe you do in the NBA. But now with NIL, with salary caps, with obviously rev sharing, and I think you work with this with the 33rd team. What is it that college football programs and GMs and coaches, what are they still trying to figure out about negotiating, about salary caps, about bonus incentives that, in the NFL, has been a staple of how you do business? Are they still catching up in that area?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great questions going on, Woj, and really it's decision-making within context. And what I mean by that is for decades, you would sit there and say, hey, like, we want to give, Adrian a scholarship, and, that counts the number, and it's sort of like a very quick and binary decision, not to minimize it, but now there's a much more rigorous approach in terms of, if we pay Woj X amount, then we're not going to have more money to pay somebody else. And I always define my job as the point guard of information. Can I sit between the head coach and the owner and say, if we're going to stretch on the quarterback, than our starting right guards in the third round. And for an example, like working with Rex Ryan was great, Woj, because he wanted to have length and athleticism on the back end. So be it Darrelle Revis, Antonio Cromartie. And I always said, well, how are we going to balance the budget? And we talk a lot about, not paying guards or linebackers or even safeties. And that was really helpful from a team building standpoint because it let you balance your budget. Now, moving forward, the schools we work with, we talk a lot about even like auditing your own coaching staff. And what I mean by that, Woj, is if you have a great play caller, but someone that can't develop players, you may want to spend a little bit more at that position. Whereas you may have another coach who just loves taking the raw materials of a 17 or 18-year-old and really is driven to get that player on the field at a winning level. And I think the schools that are doing a really good job now, Woj, they're actually looking at their coaching staff in a very complementary way to maximizing and making the dollars in revenue sharing as efficient as possible. And I think the schools that will have sustained success will understand, like, we can't pay them all. How do we develop them? How are we rewarding the right behavior and putting that all together for sustainability?
It's funny. You look in the NFL and listen, the Chiefs have had an incredible run, really by any era. But I think this salary cap, with salary cap mechanisms and essentially a hard cap in the NFL, unlike baseball, unlike the NBA, although the NBA has gotten closer to it, it's harder to keep teams together. It's harder to build something, really long-term and sustainable. And you have injuries and guys age out and all those things. Is the college football model, you think, and probably I think college basketball too, dramatically changed in that, the kind of dominance Nick Saban had when,
Yes.
there was, I don't want to say there was, maybe he had a competitive advantage before NIL that doesn't exist now. Have we seen the end of those really dynastic college programs just because there are so many programs who have money, have comparable money, and it is just spreading the talent out?
Yeah, I would say it's going to be harder, not impossible. So if you go back a couple of years, I mean, you could look at the legendary, like even like the receiver rooms of at Alabama, going to like Devontae Smith and on and on and on of guys that were just like high picks, like one after the other. You could like chart like like their running back room of from like Derrick Henry and Mark Ingram, like just on and on and on. Receivers like very well documented, starting like with Julio Jones, who Nick will tell you like really helped change the program, and they start getting speed. So you could really look at it, from a skill standpoint. Nowadays, even like the Tua Jalen Hurts situation was Mike Locksley, the offensive coordinator, was able to keep Tua and and Jalen Hurts there. Like that wouldn't happen anymore because one of them is going to leave and say, I could go get paid by school X. I think there is sustainability when you look at a guy like Kirk Cignetti, who's done a great job relative to player development. It's just harder to do. And I think the other really interesting dynamic is you could look at somebody like Carson Beck, who could have been in the draft, reportedly getting paid about $5 million from the University of Miami. For decades, Woj, it was always about get to the NFL, get through 3 years, get to your second contract. That's where you get the life-changing money. Now you can make an argument at some point the dollars are big enough in college that if you say, you know what, Carson Beck, if you're going to be a 6th-round pick or you can get $5 million, so we call it Pro Football Saturday and Pro Football Sunday. And like to me, it's it's not impossible, but like again, you go back to those Alabama skill players again, like Jalen Waddle, like it was one after the other. And I just don't know if you would keep that group together the way that Nick was able to do it.
The holidays are all about finding the perfect gift. But this time of year, not every deal is actually what it seems. We've all been there. Scammers are getting more creative to trick people into sharing their payment info through methods like fake shopping sites and giveaways that are simply too good to be true. Luckily, Cash App's 24/7 fraud monitoring helps detect and alert you for unusual card activity should someone gain access to your card, so you can act fast if something seems off. You can also lock or unlock your Cash App card instantly right in the app for extra control and peace of mind. Stay one step ahead of scams this season and keep your money secure with Cash App. For limited time only, new Cash App customers can use our exclusive code to earn some additional cash. For real, just download Cash App, use our exclusive referral code SECURE10 in your profile, send $5 to a friend within 14 days, and you'll get $10 dropped right into your account. Terms apply. That's money. That's Cash App. Cash App is a financial services platform, not a bank. Banking services provided by Cash App's bank partner. Prepaid debit cards issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC. Promotions provided by Cash App, a Block Inc. brand. Visit cash.app/legal/podcast for full disclosures.
With the holidays coming up, it's that time of year where you have to figure out a gift for that person who's really, really hard to shop for, whether it's mom, dad, a significant other. There's always that one person. But here's the good news. Cozy Earth exists, and that way you're able to give this person the gift of comfort for the holidays. Cozy Earth offers great pajama sets and blankets like their bamboo pajama set or their bubble cuddle blanket. I mean, the name bubble cuddle alone sounds luxurious and comfortable. These are both perfect for those winter nights where you're going to watch a movie, sit by the fire, or just hang out doing anything. And here's the best part. It's a risk-free purchase. What does that mean? It means a 100-night sleep trial. Try out the pajamas. If you don't love them, return them hassle-free. But guess what? You're probably not going to return them. Also, there's a 10-year warranty because once you feel this level of comfort, you're going to want it for at least a decade. And so right now, we have Black Friday coming up, the Thanksgiving holiday, this weekend only. From Thanksgiving through Cyber Monday, get 40% off at CozyEarth.com with the code WOJ, W-O-J. It's the best deal of the year. And if you get a post-purchase survey, be sure to mention you heard about Cozy Earth right here. Wrap the ones you love in luxury with Cozy Earth.
Mike, probably no figure maybe more important to your career and probably outside of your family or life than Bill Parcells. You worked with him with the Jets. You guys had a lot of success together. And then in Miami, you ran both teams. What was the most important lesson you learned from Bill Parcells about team building, about putting a roster together, about creating a unit that can win?
Yeah, how many hours do we have? To be candid, I spoke to Coach yesterday. We're gonna have lunch on Monday, and it'll be at 11:30, and I'll be there at 11:20, and I'll be late. And the two questions he's gonna ask me is how much do I weigh and how much money I have in the bank, and it'll be too much of one and not enough of the other. And he's meant more to me than outside my parents and anybody. Like taught me way more about life than football. As it relates to football, though, what's interesting, Woj? Like a lot of people don't realize this. Like we're all talking about like data and analytics now. He was very much into that 30 years ago. And let me be specific. When you really research him, his player personnel background was driven by a gentleman named Bucko Kilroy, who was like the personnel director of the Patriots in the late 70s and the early 80s. And Bill was initially a linebacker coach there, but he had a lot of interest in team building. And Bucko was into this, what's known as a typing system, meaning if a player has the requisite height, weight, and speed, they got a certain letter like an I. And what Bill always talked about was like, look, ironically, an exception was like Aaron Glenn, the current head coach of the Jets, an undersized corner. But he's like, I want big men because over time, if you have the requisite height, weight, and speed, you have a better chance of surviving in a sport that has a lot of physicality. And how we built the team, how we paid players, like Aaron Glenn was ironically one of the very few players we paid that didn't have the requisite prototype from a size standpoint. And then, from a character standpoint, I think a lot of that was like the formative years of the Giants where, LT, obviously Woj had a very, documented challenges off the field. but the patience and the nurturing he had, but also like there was a line. So those were sort of like some of the principles. And I will tell you, like as a young person, like I was scared to death to work for him. And it probably took me like a year and a half to earn his trust. But my gosh, like when you delivered for him, like there was no better feeling in the world.
It was always interesting, and you saw it with him, and I think Bill Belichick, especially coaches who have such a long track record of success. And, there was a lot of overlapping between Parcells and Belichick with staff, with players. But I think, and I'm learning this in this job at St. Bonaventure, where we have a coach, Mark Schmidt, who's in his 19th season. And so when we're evaluating players and recruiting players, having some benchmark guys that you've had in your program where you say, hey, this guy really reminds me of this guy who we had success with and looks sort of the same at this earlier developmental point. And it's something for those guys to lean on because they're head coaches and they can't be on the road all the time evaluating players. But I think there's some security in saying, hey, I know what that looks like with us. And, you just think of the guys, the Meggetts and the Pattons and sort of even, those role-playing skill guys. Um, I don't know that they invented it, but to me, it always sort of felt like you knew what a Parcells guy looked like. You knew what a Belichick guy looked like. And now for me at Bonaventure, I think we know what a Mark Schmidt player looks like. And it's something for me in this job that's so important. And obviously you were on the inside of bringing him players that fit, whether they had been with the team and you're bringing them back or younger players who obviously are on their way up.
Yeah, I'll tell you a full world story. That's just crazy about this. So, Bill wanted like certain players, like again, 3, 4 outside linebackers. They had to be big and strong and be able to set the edge. Like the best prototype was Carl Banks. Like Carl was a big, rugged guy that could set the edge. Willie McGinnis was another one. We drafted another buddy in at the Jets, Brian Thomas, who physically, like, they all look the same. My son is at the University of Virginia. He's a freshman snapper, and I'm going down there, and Chris Slade is on the staff there, and Chris Slade like is exactly like I'm like he could go line up right now. Like he could set the edge, he could drop, he could take the running back on a wheel route. Like like it was is like these lineback, and then the inverse is he tells the story of like he was a good player, but he gets to Dallas like Dat Wen, who was a good player but undersized. He's like, I don't want my linebackers coming out of a Volkswagen. Like he thought Zach Thomas was a great player. Zach Thomas, who is actually ironically a friend and a neighbor in Florida. Our kids went to the same school. We paid Kevin Mawai basically because Kevin had the athleticism to go block Zach Thomas in space. And, but Zach Thomas was tiny, and like Bill wouldn't want him on the team, but he was a pain in the ass to block. And absolutely, Testaverde was a guy that gets cut by the Ravens in June of 98. He is on the streets, like unemployed. And Bill's like, this guy has all the tools. He is the right size. He's a great kid. He's from Long Island. I want to sign him as a backup. And, we obviously hit gold with him, took us to the championship game. And he a big lesson with Vinny too was we signed him so late, no off-season program, but he was as disciplined of a player, like his workout regimen, his diet regimen. It was really impressive, Woj, to watch.
Mike, you had an interesting detour in your career as a coaching agent with Priority Sports. It was really the first time you and I dealt with each other as professionals. I knew you, and then obviously later on we were at ESPN together. But 2 instances where, and you weren't there very long, maybe 8 or 9 months. I'm trying to remember, a year.
Yep.
Yeah.
That.
But the 2 instances on 2 pretty prominent coaching searches, the Cleveland Cavaliers search that ended up with David Blatt, who I had known from covering FIBA basketball. He was an American who was living abroad and really successful. Came into Cleveland right before the Cavs brought LeBron James back. And then the Steve Kerr coaching sweepstakes, which nearly ended up with the Knicks and then went to the Warriors. But I do remember a conversation with you, Mike. Blatt was actually talking with the Warriors about being an assistant. And I think Steve Kerr had given him a lot of time to kind of go through the Cavs process, but he needed an answer. He needed to hire a coach. And I remember having a conversation with you, I think on a morning when Blatt was going to get on a plane and fly to, I think, Golden State or go meet Kerr somewhere and take the job. And I think I kept telling you, don't put him on that plane. He's going to get this job in Cleveland. I think I had talked to Dan Gilbert the previous couple of days, and I think you and I were going back and forth about whether that would be the case. And then I think you got a call that morning that it was going down. But being on that side of it, Mike, what did you learn that helped you when you went back to the team side?
Always trust Woj. Like Woj and Adam Schefter, and then there's everybody else you knew things before everybody else. A couple thoughts. So, working with David was incredible because of his unique European background. We were actually from the same part of Massachusetts, Framingham and Needham. And he was a great guy who had like the unique gift of being able to relate to people of disparate backgrounds. And Steve really wanted him and got mad at me when I'm like, you're going to lose him. He's going to be head coach. He's like, but he was going to be my right-hand guy. And, I remember having a tough conversation with Steve, but you absolutely gave us the right information at the right time, because if not, I don't know how the world would have unfolded. And, the part about Steve, like representing Steve Kerr was, it was such a privilege. Like there was guys like Dan Quinn and Matt LaFleur, Anthony Lynn, amongst others. But with Steve, I had a year to work with him to get him ready to be a head coach. And he was at the time broadcasting. He was a successful GM of the Suns that a lot of people, don't remember. So we spent the thing about Steve that people don't realize, he is not a what you see is what you get guy. Like he is so uber competitive, and he comes across as like this nice, affable guy, which he is, but he will cut your throat out in the most competitive way. And he was so driven, Woj, not to be a head coach in the NBA, but to be a great head coach. And I'll never forget, he went up to see Seattle, to spend time with Pete Carroll and Dan Quinn. And he called me as he was leaving practice. He's like, Mike, I'm going to be a really good head coach. I'm like, yeah, I know that, but like, why are you saying that? He's like, because I saw authenticity today. I saw Pete Carroll coach in a way that was very authentic to him. And I'm not going to be Phil Jackson, and I'm not going to be Greg Popovich. I'm going to be Steve Kerr. But I saw a great program today, and I saw people that were coaching in a way that was comfortable for them. And I'll never forget that conversation. And Steve, to his credit, went to Saratoga, New York, and spent time with Parcells, amongst many others. And it was just amazing, like how observant he was, how much he knew exactly what he wanted, why he wanted it, and the humility and the like intrinsic sort of intellectual curiosity to be great at it.
Hearing about the strategy behind roster building reminds me of how Novig approaches sports predictions. It's all about making smart plays with the best odds. On Novig, you're in control, matching up directly with other fans, not the house. No vig, just fair matchups. Learn more about Novig, America's #1 sports prediction market, at novig.us/Woj, and use code the program for a match up to $100 on your first purchase. What do you remember about the final hours of negotiating between New York and then maybe Steve starting to feel a little more pulled toward not going with his mentor, Phil Jackson, but going to take over what was obviously a better team and a team ready to win with the Warriors?
Yeah, it's really funny. Like we can laugh about it now, but we were down the road with the Knicks. I think that's well documented at this point, Woj. And there was obviously affinity between him and Phil Jackson, who was running basketball operations at the time for the Knicks. Steve then had a meeting with Rick Welts that obviously went exceptionally well, and that kind of was like a pivot of like, okay, like the Knicks are the Knicks, and that's a wonderful opportunity. But you look at the Warriors roster. Steve's a West Coast guy. He knows Rick Welts well. Obviously, he gets to know ownership. He gets to know Bob Myers, and the rest is obviously history. There was like instant chemistry and connectivity. Well, representing Steve, my job is to get him the best deal and to keep all options open. And I'll never forget, I'm driving to Chicago for the basketball combine, and I get a call from Bob Myers. I pull over in the parking lot of a McDonald's in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Bob puts together a very, very aggressive offer for a first offer. And I'm like, come on, Bob, like, we don't have much time here. And the Knicks are, really trying to get this done. He's like, hey, Mike, this is my first offer. I'm like, okay, you're right. You're right, Bob. And like, of course, we can laugh about it now. And then in very short order, we got that deal done. I give the Warriors a ton of credit because they were so aggressive. They knew who they wanted. They know why they wanted them. And obviously, the rest is history. It's easy to sit here and say that now, but, Woj, like, that was not a no-brainer for Golden State to give Steve such a good deal, never coached before. And again, it's easy, hindsight's 2020, but at the time, I give Bob and Joe Lacob a ton of credit.
Yeah, because they'd had a coach that they had let go, and Mark Jackson, who had not coached before. And so sometimes you go opposite when you make the next hire, and there was that similarity, obviously, 4 championships later. Mike, final question, and we asked this at the end of all of our shows here with the program about the future. And I wonder, when you look 5-10 years out, and let's say the NFL, what the future is going to look like. It is, and I think this is perhaps a lot of your focus with the 33rd team. Is it figuring out how to win on the edges, technology, data, the human body? What's going to look different? What's going to be the focus in the future in that sport that maybe looks different than right now?
Yeah, I think absolutely. It starts with like sports science and technology from a standpoint. Players want wellness. They want to be the best they could be. You're seeing that certainly at the Division I level in all sports, like to have sustainability. Players want to know they have sort of a professional level of resources. And then absolutely like informed decision-making with data, something we're doing a lot at the 33rd team. Those will be like 2 sort of like fundamental principles to anchor in as we move forward.
Mike, you're the best. Great to visit with you. I know you and I will talk again soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
A big thank you to my guest this week, ESPN's NFL front office insider, Mike Tannenbaum. Be sure to catch future episodes of the program on X, YouTube, and your favorite podcast platform. We'll see you next Wednesday.